The scream tore out of me before I could stop it, raw and jagged, like glass splintering in a quiet room. My mother didn't flinch. She stood there, her thin lips pressed into a line, holding out a dress that looked like it had been dragged through a thrift store's red-jacked pile, yellowed lace, damp at the hem, sleeves that sagged like they'd given up long before I had. "You're marrying him," she said, her voice flat, final, no questions, no arguments. The air in our cramped Tacoma living room felt heavier than the August heat outside, thick with the weight of her words. I was 30, but in that moment, I was a child again, shrinking under her gaze, my hands trembling as I took the dress. It smelled of mildew and someone else's regret. I wanted to scream again, to hurl the dress at the peeling wallpaper, to demand why. Why him? Why now? Why me? But the words stayed lodged in my throat, where they'd lived for years, suffocated by a lifetime of "yes, Mama," and "okay, Daddy." My mother turned away, her heels clicking on the warped linoleum, already done with me. My sister, Olivia, lounged on the couch, her manicured nails scrolling through her phone, a smirk curling her lips. "Don't forget to wash your hair, Clara," she said, not looking up. "You don't want to scare him off before he's stuck with you." Her laugh was a knife, sharp and careless, slicing through the silence. The dress hung heavy in my arms, its damp hem brushing my bare feet. I stood frozen, staring at the faded floral pattern, the uneven stitches, the neckline that looked like it had been sewn by someone who hated me. This wasn't a wedding dress. It was a shroud. My mother's words echoed in my skull. "This is your place." As if I were a piece of furniture to be rearranged, a problem to be solved, a daughter to be discarded. I'd spent my life swallowing their disappointments, nodding through their dismissals, giving up dreams to care for Aunt Margaret when her lungs gave out. I'd stayed in this crumbling house while Olivia went to college, got her fancy job, her shiny life. I was the one who stayed, who scrubbed the floors, who kept quiet. And now this. A marriage to a man I barely knew, a stranger named Ethan, because they'd decided I was done here. Ethan Dawson. I'd met him twice. Once when he fixed the leaky faucet at the community center, his hands steady as he tightened a pipe, his eyes barely meeting mine. Once when he dropped off a box of canned goods for the church, his voice low, saying little more than "here you go." A mechanic, they said, quiet, dependable, good enough for a girl like me. A girl who didn't ask questions, who didn't make waves, who belonged in the background. I didn't even know his last name until the pastor mumbled it during the rehearsal. Dawson? It sounded like a placeholder, like everything else in my life. The wedding was 5 days later in a Seattle chapel that smelled of damp carpet and broken promises. No flowers, no music, no cousins laughing in the pews. Just a handful of people who showed up out of habit, their faces blank, their whispers sharp. The pews creaked like they were mourning, and the pastor's voice droned, half asleep, as if he'd rather be anywhere else. I stood there in that awful dress, too tight at the arms, too loose at the waist, feeling like a prop in someone else's story. My name was misspelled on the program, Clara, with an I. And when I pointed it out to Mama, she glanced at it and shrugged. "Doesn't matter anymore," she said, her eyes already drifting to the door. "Doesn't matter." I was being erased, letter by letter, and she didn't even care. After the vows, mumbled words I barely heard through the fog in my head. I signed the marriage license with a pen that scratched the paper like it was fighting me. My mother leaned toward Olivia, her whisper cutting through the stale air. Thank God we got rid of her. I froze, my hand still on the pen, my heart stuttering. They didn't hug me, didn't say goodbye, didn't even look back as I climbed into Ethan's rusty pickup truck. The door groaned as I pulled it shut, the sound louder than the vows I'd just spoken. I buckled the seatbelt, the cheap fabric of the dress wrinkling under it, and clutched my purse. It held nothing but a single scarf, white cotton with a stitched C in the corner, a gift from Aunt Margaret. She'd pressed it into my hand before she died, her voice weak but firm. "Keep something with your name on it, Clara. Always." I gripped it now, my knuckles white, as the truck rumbled to life. Ethan didn't speak. His hands stayed steady on the wheel, eyes fixed on the gravel road stretching out like a wound through the gray Washington woods. I stared out the window, not seeing the trees or the rain-slicked mailboxes, only hearing my mother's voice. "This is your place." I wanted to cry, to scream, to demand answers from the stranger beside me. Did he know I had no choice? Did he care? But my voice stayed buried, just like it always had. Counted the turns in the road, left, right, left again, like they were stitches I could one day unravel. The truck rattled on, kicking up mud, carrying me toward a life I hadn't chosen. Hours later, the trees thinned and signs of life appeared. Low fences, tidy lawns, houses with pastel shutters. A road sign flashed by, "Welcome to Astoria, Oregon." The sun was sinking, painting the sky a bruised purple. Ethan pulled into a driveway behind a whitewashed house, parking beside a small cabin tucked into a garden that smelled of rosemary and salt air. The porch light glowed, soft and steady, the steps free of cracks, the windows clean. I'd expected neglect, rot, something to match the decay I felt inside. Instead, there was lavender blooming by the door, and a quiet that didn't feel like a threat. Ethan stepped out, walked around, and opened my door without a word. I followed him inside, clutching my purse like it was a lifeline. The cabin was small, one bedroom, a living room, a galley kitchen, but everything was cared for. Folded towels on the counter, a swept floor, dishes drying neatly in a rack. A ceiling fan hummed softly, stirring the warm air. "You can take the bed," Ethan said, his voice low, like he was trying not to startle me. "I'll sleep out here if that's okay." He didn't wait for an answer, just moved past me, pulling a screwdriver from a drawer to fix a crooked cabinet hinge. I stood there, still in that awful dress, watching him work with a focus that felt almost sacred. He didn't demand conversation, didn't fill the silence with empty words. It was disorienting, this quiet. Not the tense kind I'd grown up with, full of glares and guilt, but something softer, like a space carved out for me to breathe. He cooked eggs, toast, a slice of avocado, and set a plate on the table. "There's water in the fridge," he said. "You don't need to talk if you don't want to." I sat, the fork heavy in my hand, and ate. For the first time in days, maybe years, my breath came steady, not a gasp for survival, but a rhythm I was allowed to own. Ethan folded a dish towel, stepped outside, and left me alone with the dusk creeping through the window. I stayed in that chair, staring at the bruised sky, the fork idle on my plate. I didn't know what to make of him. A mechanic with calloused hands, yet his kindness felt too deliberate, too careful. Was it a mask? A trap? I couldn't tell. Not yet. That night, I showered, the hot water washing away the grit of the day, but not the weight in my chest. Ethan had left a folded t-shirt on the bed, clean and soft, smelling of laundry soap. I slipped it on, my fingers brushing the scarf still tucked in my purse. I turned on my phone, the screen's glow harsh in the dim room. One message from my mother, "Don't come back. It's done. We've moved on." 7 words, no punctuation, no warmth. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone or scream. I just powered it off, set it face down on the nightstand, and lay on the edge of the bed, too tired to get under the covers. The scarf stayed in my hand, the stitched C rough against my palm. I expected something bad, a knock, a shout, a door slamming. But nothing came. The room was cool, the sheets clean, the silence gentle. I didn't dream that night. I just slept, and for once, it was enough. Morning came, the sun spilling through the window like warm honey. The ache in my body was duller, less sharp. I sat up, the smell of toast drifting from the kitchen. Ethan was outside, barefoot in the small garden, watering tomato plants with slow, deliberate movements. I watched him from the porch. His shoulders relaxed, no tension, no rush. Just a man and a hose and the quiet earth. "Thank you," I said, my voice hoarse from sleep or silence. He set the watering can down. "You don't owe me anything," he replied. "Eat while it's warm." I turned back to the table, where a plate of eggs and toast waited, steam curling upward. My stomach growled, but something else stirred too, a flicker of something I couldn't name, not yet. Then it happened. A storm rolled in that afternoon, sudden and brutal, the kind that turns the Oregon coast into a war zone. The power flickered, then died, plunging the cabin into gray shadows. Wind howled, rattling the windows, shaking the walls like they might collapse. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, the scarf clutched in my fist. Ethan was still outside, his figure blurred by sheets of rain. I ran to the door, shouting his name, my voice swallowed by the storm. He stumbled in, soaked, his hair plastered to his face, but calm. "It's just weather," he said, grabbing towels. But it wasn't just weather to me. It was chaos, a reminder of how little control I had, how easily everything could break. As we dried off, the storm still raging, I noticed something under the sink, a sleek stainless steel toolbox, out of place in this modest cabin. Snap-on, the kind that costs thousands, not the battered kit of a small-town mechanic. My eyes lingered on it, questions clawing at me. Who was this man? What was he hiding? Later that night, as the storm quieted, I found something else. A hidden safe tucked behind a loose panel in the bedroom wall, its lock cold and unyielding. I touched it, my fingers trembling, wondering what secrets it held. Ethan's footsteps creaked outside the door, and I shoved the panel back, my pulse racing. He didn't come in, didn't ask what I was doing, but the air felt heavier now, charged with unspoken truths. The next day, restless, I followed him. He left early, trading his truck for a sleek charcoal sedan I'd never seen. I tailed him at a distance, my old car rattling as I drove through Astoria's quiet streets into Portland. The city grew denser, Victorian homes giving way to glass towers that gleamed like knives in the morning light. He pulled into the underground lot of a high-rise all-black glass and sharp edges, the kind of place where men in suits sipped overpriced coffee and talked stock options. I parked across the street, my hands tight on the wheel, watching as Ethan walked through the automatic doors. No toolbox, no grease stains, just confidence. A mechanic didn't belong here. So who was he? That night, back at the cabin, I cooked dinner, chicken and green beans, something to keep my hands busy while my mind spun. Ethan came in late, smelling faintly of cologne, not motor oil. He took off his shoes at the door, nodded at me, and sat down to eat. I couldn't hold it in anymore. "You said you fixed things," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "What kind of things are in that building downtown?" He paused, his fork hovering, then set it down with a half smile. "I fix what people break when they forget what matters," he said. No explanation, no deflection. Just those words, heavy with meaning I couldn't yet grasp. I didn't push. Not then. But as I lay awake that night, the ceiling fan humming above me, I felt the weight of questions piling up. The toolbox, the safe, the sedan, the high-rise, none of it fit the man I'd married. And yet his kindness, his quiet, his refusal to demand anything from me, it was disorienting, like a puzzle with missing pieces. I didn't trust it, not fully, not after a lifetime of being told I was nothing, but for the first time, I didn't want to run. I wanted to stay, to unravel the mystery of Ethan Dawson, to find out who he was and who I could become. In a world that had never wanted me. The scarf stayed in my pocket, the stitched C a reminder of Aunt Margaret's words, "Keep something with your name on it." I wasn't Clara, the mistake, the burden, the girl who didn't matter. I was Clara, and I was here. And maybe, just maybe, I'd find out what that meant. The rain had stopped, but the air in Astoria clung to me, heavy with salt and secrets. I stood at the kitchen window, my fingers tracing the edge of the monogrammed scarf tucked in my pocket, the stitched C rough against my skin. Ethan's words from last night echoed in my head. I fix what people break when they forget what matters. Cryptic, deliberate, like a door half opened to a room I wasn't sure I wanted to enter. The cabin was quiet now, too quiet, the kind that doesn't soothe but amplifies every doubt. I sipped cold coffee, staring at the garden where Ethan's tomato plants swayed in the morning breeze. He was gone again, off in that sleek sedan that didn't belong to a mechanic, leaving me with questions that felt like splinters under my nails. I'd survived the storm, the wedding, the dismissal from my family, but survival wasn't enough anymore. I needed answers. About Ethan, about the safe I'd found behind the bedroom panel, about why this cabin felt like a stage set for a life I didn't understand. I set the mug down, my hands steady despite the pulse hammering in my chest. I was done waiting for permission to exist. Today I'd go back to Tacoma, to my sister Olivia's promotion party, to face the family that had thrown me away. I told myself it was for closure, but deep down, I wanted them to see me, really see me, even if it hurt. The drive to Tacoma was 5 hours, each mile stretching longer than the last. My old car rattled, the engine coughing like it was as tired as I was. The scarf stayed in my pocket, a talisman against the memories clawing at me. My mother's voice, "This is your place." Olivia's smirk, the misspelled program at my wedding. I'd asked Ethan to stay behind. "It's just a small thing for Olivia," I'd lied, not wanting him to see the wreckage of my past. He'd nodded, his eyes steady, and let me go without a fight. That quiet trust unnerved me more than any argument would have. As I pulled up to the family home, my stomach twisted. The house was unrecognizable, freshly painted in trendy gray, white shutters gleaming like they belonged in a magazine. 3 rental cars lined the street, and a valet in a crisp vest stood by the curb. A valet. In Tacoma? This wasn't a small thing, it was a spectacle, a stage for Olivia's triumph, and I was walking into it uninvited, or so it felt. I stepped out, clutching the small hand-stitched gift I'd made for Olivia, a table runner embroidered with her favorite quote, the thread chosen to match the curtains of her old room. It was all I could afford, all I had to give. Inside, the house was a stranger's. Gone were the doilies, the rocking chair, the faded photos of my grandparents. The furniture was modern, white, cold, like a showroom for someone else's life. Music played, glasses clinked, and the air smelled of catered food, lavender-crusted lamb, not the meatloaf of my childhood. My mother saw me, her eyes skimming over me like I was a smudge on the window. "Oh," she said, her voice flat. "There you are." No hug, no smile, just a vague gesture toward the back patio. "They're out there. Try not to make an entrance." Her words landed like a slap, the kind that doesn't leave a mark but bruises deep. I walked through the living room invisible. No one said my name. A woman in pearls glanced at my worn flats and whispered to her friend, their laughter sharp. I held the gift tighter, its edges digging into my palms. On the patio, Olivia stood by a glass table piled with gift bags. Gucci, Louis Vuitton, names I'd only seen in ads. My table runner looked pathetic next to them, a child's craft in a sea of wealth. Olivia turned, her hair swept over one shoulder, her smile as cold as the champagne flute in her hand. "Didn't expect you'd actually show," she said, her voice dripping with surprise as if I were a stray dog that had wandered in. "I was invited," I said, keeping my tone even. She shrugged, sipping her drink, offering me nothing. The crowd hushed for the big reveal. A 2-tiered cake covered in pink sugar roses, gold script curling across it. "To our pride, Olivia, not our daughters, not even her name, just a title that erased me completely." My throat tightened, but I swallowed it down, my face a mask. Someone laughed, and Olivia leaned close, her voice syrupy. "Well, you're not the one people came to celebrate." A few guests chuckled, their eyes sliding past me. I stepped back, bumping into a waiter, mumbling an apology he didn't hear. I was a ghost here, just as I'd been at home, at the wedding, in my own life. Then I heard it. My mother, near the punch bowl, smiling at an old friend. "You must be so proud of your daughters," the woman said, her voice warm. My mother didn't pause. "I only have one daughter," she said. "The other was a mistake we fixed." The world tilted. My body went still, the edges of my vision blurring like I was underwater. The fizz of the soda fountain, the buzz of summer bugs, the snap of a teenager's phone camera, all of it faded into a dull roar. I carried my plate to the kitchen, set it in the sink, and moved toward the hall, my feet automatic. My mother's voice followed, low but clear. "She's just a charity case. You'll see, this won't last." I didn't storm out, didn't yell. I just walked, the porch's cool air hitting me like a lifeline. The drive back to Astoria was a blur, my hands cold on the wheel. The road hugged the cliffs, rain-slicked and treacherous, the ocean roaring below. My car skidded once, tires screaming as I jerked the wheel, the guardrail inches away. My heart pounded, but I kept driving, the scarf in my pocket grounding me. I'd survived worse than a slippery road. But when I reached the cabin, the porch light was on, a beacon Ethan had left for me. Inside, the warmth was gone, replaced by a silence that didn't heal, only echoed my mother's words. A mistake we fixed. I hung my bag, went to the bedroom, and sat in the dark, the scarf pressed to my palm. Ethan had left chamomile tea still warm and a folded blanket. He always remembered. I didn't drink the tea. I didn't sleep. I just sat, replaying every word, every glance, every dismissal. The next morning, Ethan tapped the door frame, holding a cream-colored envelope. "Invitation came for you," he said. "Well, for us, I think." It was heavy, embossed with a hawthorn crest, inviting us to a dinner at their estate. "What's the occasion?" I asked, frowning. He shrugged. "Could be just neighborly politeness." I didn't believe it, not after the high-rise, the sedan, the toolbox. But I nodded, slipping the scarf into my pocket. I'd go, but not as the girl they expected, the one who stayed quiet, who disappeared. Saturday came fast. I wore a dark green dress, simple but neat, the scarf tucked into my sleeve. Ethan wore a charcoal blazer, sharp across his shoulders, like he belonged in places I didn't. The Hawthorne estate was grand, all polished wood and quiet wealth, portraits on the walls that seemed to watch you. A woman in pearls greeted us, her smile bright for Ethan. "Mr. Dawson," she said, then glanced at me, her eyes flickering. "Oh, we weren't expecting a +1. The pause hit like a needle, precise and painful. My stomach tightened, but I followed Ethan inside, where champagne flutes clinked and laughter bubbled. I drifted to the patio, needing air, needing space. That's when I heard it, behind a folding screen. "She's just a guest, right? We only invited Mr. Dawson." My breath caught. I was invisible again, even here, in a world I thought might be different. I slipped into the powder room, locked the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. My skin was too pale, my eyes too tired, my shoulders braced for another blow. I pulled out the scarf, whispering, "Am I invisible even here?" The tears came, not loud, not dramatic, but heavy, the kind that carve rivers through you. I sat on the floor, knees drawn up, and let them fall. When they stopped, I fixed my face, walked out, and smiled through dinner, clinking glasses like nothing had happened. But something had shifted. The next day, another invitation arrived, this time to a Hawthorne gala. Ethan said they'd asked for a +1, that he'd given my name. I didn't believe it was that simple, but I went. I wore a navy dress, plain but dignified, the scarf tucked close. At the estate, a woman with a clipboard rushed over. "Mr. Dawson, thank goodness," she said, then turned to me, thrusting a tray of hors d'oeuvres into my hands. "Just arrange them neatly, napkin under each." I looked at Ethan, but he was pulled aside by the host. I could have corrected her, set the tray down, walked away. Instead, I took it, walked to the kitchen, and arranged the shrimp canapes with care, whispering, "If I'm serving, I'll serve like a queen." I glided through the crowd, invisible to men in cufflinks and women in diamonds, hearing their whispers, their secrets. Then I heard the click of heels, a familiar gait. Olivia. She swept in, her hair curled, a pearl necklace gleaming at her throat, her perfume sharp and expensive. She didn't see me, didn't care to, her voice lilting as she greeted the host's wife. "Darlings, you outdid yourselves." They toasted to new beginnings, to healing, while I moved silently, plate in hand. Then it happened. Olivia, reaching for a wine glass, tipped her flute, red wine spilling across the tablecloth like blood. The room gasped. I stepped forward, pulling a napkin from the tray. "Here," I said, holding it out. She took it, eyes on the mess, murmuring, "Oh, thank you, dear." I didn't move. "You're welcome, Mother." The word cracked through the room like a whip. Faces froze, glasses stilled. Olivia looked up, confusion giving way to stunned recognition. "Clara," she whispered, her voice faltering. I smiled, calm, unapologetic. "Still just a mistake, right?" I set the tray down, turned and walked out, the door clicking softly behind me. The night air smelled of magnolia and freedom, cleaner than the room I'd left. My phone buzzed as I reached the cabin. Olivia's text, "You've humiliated yourself. Stay away." I deleted it, my hands steady, my breath even. I was done carrying their weight. Inside, Ethan poured tea, set it beside me, and sat quietly. "You asked who I am," he said, leaning forward. "I think you're ready now." My heart skipped, but I sat, letting the silence answer. "My last name isn't Dawson," he began. "It's Hawthorne." The words landed like a stone in still water. He was part of the Hawthorne empire. Furniture, real estate, wealth I couldn't fathom. He'd rejected it, built his own green energy firm under his grandfather's name, Dawson, to escape his mother's shadow. "I never told you because I didn't want to test you," he said. "You didn't see a bank account. You just saw me." I laughed, bitter at the edges. "I failed that tonight, didn't I?" He shook his head. "You didn't fail. You stood up." I woke the next morning, the dawn bruised and quiet. I opened my laptop, the cursor blinking like a challenge. I typed, "Subject, Hawthorne Foundation statement from Clara." I wrote the truth. My wedding, the cake with no name, the silence that tried to erase me. I named Olivia, my mother, their cruelty, not with venom but with clarity. I listed 10 rural Oregon schools, underfunded, overlooked like I'd been. "I am not your mistake. I am your reminder." I hit send, my hand steady. Days later, responses flooded in, principals, journalists, people who'd read every word. Then a break-in shook the cabin. My belongings were tossed, the scarf untouched, but the safe was still locked. Who knew I was here? What did they want? Another envelope arrived, navy blue, the Hawthorne crest in gold. My name was at the top. Co-director, Hawthorne Foundation Gala. Ethan smiled softly. It's yours. At the gala, under the glass dome of the Forsyte Conservatory, I stepped onto the stage. Ethan introduced me. She's been called a mistake, but tonight she holds the pen. The mic was cool in my hand. I thank those who never believed in me, I said. You made me sharper. I spoke for every girl told to hush, every daughter erased. The room stood, applauding, their eyes on me. Olivia, in red, accused me of flaunting Ethan's wealth. I slipped on my ring, the one I'd hidden since the wedding. I came to claim what's mine, I said, walking past her. Weeks later, an acceptance letter arrived. Nursing school, a dream I'd buried. I answered Olivia's call, her voice cracked. I didn't know you could speak like that. I sipped my tea. I always could. You never listened. I ended the call not out of anger, but clarity. Outside the campus, a student called me Dr. Hawthorne. I laughed. Not yet. The scarf still in my pocket wasn't a weight anymore. It was proof I'd risen.